Hey, welcome to Data Journalism. I am Gavin Off. I'm a data reporter at the Charlotte Observer, and for this semester, I'm going to be your instructor. Now, you guys are the smartest kids on campus. Why? Because if you watch the lessons, if you learn the skills that I'm going to teach, and if you practice it, you're going to land and keep a job. Now, it's not just jobs in newspapers like I'm in. It's jobs anywhere. Data right now is big business. So let's go over the class. Now, the information, of course, is online in the syllabus, but I think it's important enough that I tell you about it now. The class is going to be broken down into 4 parts. The first part, I apologize, it's PowerPoints, and it's going to be about data journalism, what it is, why it's important, where to find data, where to request data, and how to weave it into our stories, right? Because we're journalists here. The second part is going to be Excel. Now, I'm sure most of you all have used Excel, but I don't know if you've written formulas in Excel, and I doubt a lot of you have actually used Excel for your reporting. That's what we'll learn. The third part is structured query language. We'll learn that. Now, what's structured query language? It's a coding language that lets you analyze millions of data sets in a very quick amount of time. And it also allows databases to talk to each other. Say, for instance, you have a database of every bus driver in North Carolina. And in that database, you have the person's name, the person's date of birth, and the city that the person lives, right? And then in another database, you have every child sex offender in North Carolina. And again, you have the person's name, date of birth, and the city that person's live. Well, with SQL, you can let those data sets talk to each other. And essentially what a reporter would be able to find is, are there any bus drivers who are actually child sex offenders? An interesting story, right? And we'll wrap up the class with Tableau. And Tableau is a online mapping and chart building program that we'll learn. Behind Tableau is actually the data set that we'll be working, and we can build interactive maps and charts. Right, so 4 parts. Excel, SQL, and Tableau, they're hands-on, right? And what do I mean by hands-on? Each week, I'll post video and data online, right? And I'll probably do 2 classes a week, and I'll post them likely on a Sunday. Now, you can do them whenever you want, as long as you meet your homework deadlines, right? And those deadlines are in the syllabus. And what I'm asking you to do is, 1, watch the video, but you have to do more than that. You actually have to download the data and import it into whatever program we're using and follow along. If you just download the data and call it a day, you're going to do poorly in the class. You have to learn the skills and you have to practice the skills, just like any other technique. Practice makes perfect, right? Now, if you're having problems, if you watch the video, if you practiced, and you're still having concerns, then reach out to me, or reach out to me anytime you want, actually. But these classes build on each other, and I want you to get caught up to speed before you're left behind. Does that make sense? We'll have homework, of course, probably in about half the classes, and most of the homework will build on the data that we learned in that day's lessons, but there'll also be 2 bigger homework assignments. 1, you'll have to file an open records request for some public data, and we'll talk about that later. And 2, you'll have to interview a working data journalist. And again, that'll be in the syllabus. We'll have 2 quizzes, one on what data journalism is, and the second one at the end of the year on Tableau. And we'll have 2 tests, one on Excel and one on SQL. And of course, you'll have a final project at the end, right? And throughout the course, you'll see that we sprinkled in some videos that I helped do at the Charlotte Observer on some investigative stories. And at the end of some of the lessons, you'll see that I kind of sum up all of our data into paragraph form. And that's important because we're going to be talking about data in this class. But at the end of the day, we're data journalists, right? We're reporters, and we're just using data to tell stories. But I'm looking forward to a great year, and let's have some fun. Okay, here is my cell phone Feel free to text or call anytime you need something, and of course you have my college email address. And a little bit about myself and my journalism experience. From the Jersey Shore, I got my bachelor's degree at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2002. After Chapel Hill, I moved down to Southwest Florida and worked at a small paper there. And in around 2006, I remember sending my resume to larger papers, including the Louisville Courier-Journal. And I called up the editor after I sent my resume in, and I asked him if he got my resume, and he said, yeah, I got yours and I got 200 others. And I was like, geez Louise, how am I going to separate myself from all the other reporters out there who are looking for jobs? So that year, I started graduate school at the University of Missouri. And Missouri is home to two great nonprofits. One called Investigative Reporters and Editors. The other is called the National Institute for Computer Assisted Reporting. And it was at NICAR where I started learning database journalism. In 2007, I interned at the Columbus Dispatch. After graduating from Mizzou, I took a database job at Scripps Howard News Service's Washington, D.C. Bureau. And then in 2009, I moved out to Oklahoma, of all places, and I was the data reporter at the Tulsa World for several years. Was looking forward to get back to the East Coast, and luckily the Charlotte Observer was in need of a database reporter, so I applied for that gig and have been there ever since 2011. I work on the investigations team at the Observer, do all kinds of data work, usually for larger investigative stories, but also sometimes for quick hit dailies as well. Now, what is data journalism? I don't know how many of y'all heard about data journalism before you signed up for the course, but my take is data journalism, also known as computer assisted reporting, is using data to find and tell stories. We love numbers as data journalists, but at the end, when it comes down to it, we're reporters and we tell stories. And Bran Houston, a former professor at Mizzou, said, quote unquote, computer assisted reporting is no longer a sidebar to mainstream journalism. It is essential to surviving as a journalist in the 21st century. And I firmly believe that. When I was putting together the syllabus, I hopped on journalismjobs.com just to see what types of jobs are out there for data journalists, and you'd be surprised at the number of jobs with reporters and people in communications and PR that they're looking for data skills. Here are some of them from the state in Columbia, South Carolina. Looking for a reporter with a history of using public records and data in reporting. The University of Florida was looking for someone in their communications office with experience with data tracking and analysis with problem solving. The Fayetteville Observer, the newspaper there, familiarity with database tools and how to use data in reporting. And even Adweek is looking for a person using analytics to make data-driven editorial decisions. So the need for data is always out there, and it's going to become even more prevalent as time goes on. I guarantee it.
Data is really just a tool, no different from the other vital tools that we have in journalism. Quotes, words, photography.
Numbers have been used in journalism since journalism has existed. I think what's different are the technologies that are available to analyze that data and also to then convey that data to readers.
We want to receive information fast, quick, and direct to the point.
Data journalism will often have all the other tools of journalism in it. But what separates it out, what makes it different, is that you are finding data sources, you are interpreting those data sources, and you're using them to discover stories that you wouldn't have found otherwise.
WikiLeaks changed everything about the way that data was regarded in the newsroom. What made me realize the power of this data was when we took all the instances where at least one person died and put them on a map. Suddenly you see these patterns of roads that were obviously peppered with IEDs, or you can see what had happened in Fallujah, all these places where it's impossible for most people to go to report on them, but actually to be able to see the data can tell this very human story. Before WikiLeaks, I guess people wondered what was the point of having somebody working on data in the newsroom. Nobody ever asked me that afterwards.
We show people whole data sets, often millions and millions of rows of data. We design it in a way so that it empowers them to find things that are relevant to themselves and to their communities, rather than seeing all this data and feeling small and feeling overwhelmed by it.
I have a column called Dear Mona where readers will write in with a specific question that they have. One week we had a question asking what was the most common first and last name combination in America. Lots of pieces have been written on the most common first name, lots of pieces have been written on the most common surname, but putting the two together is actually quite statistically difficult. I think readers walked away with some really interesting piece of information about what the most common name is, but I also think it told a bigger story about immigration. The fact that a lot of the top 20 surnames are Spanish ones talks to how much this country has changed.
The reason that data journalism is important is that you can do a much better, more accurate job of describing reality if you use data. And when you describe reality better, you create the possibility that you give people information that allows society to function better and that allows them ultimately to lead better lives.
How Much is a Limb Worth is an interactive graphic that helps visually explain that the workers' compensation program in different states pay different rates for the loss of different body parts. A developer on my team named Lena Groger visualized it in a way that was very visceral, almost literally.
So some of our really early ideas for this were just like simple kind of cartoon. This was more human, proportional, realistic kind of forms. Those were amazingly creepy. We went back to a more cartoonish approach, and this ended up being our final form for the national average.
It helps do the work of a story. So a story can say different states have different rates of workers' compensation, but a reader can sit and click all day and kind of compare different limbs in different states and see which states paid you more money for you losing an arm.
I think that journalism is evolving to include readers, listeners, viewers in far more hands-on ways, and I think data journalism is a really powerful part of that.
It's not a monologue anymore, it's a dialogue. It's a conversation where users and readers have every day a higher voice.
We're able to find stories that I don't think we were able to a few years ago, thanks to the technology that we have available to us.
We're helping reinvent an entire industry, helping inform people in ways that they were never informed before.
I think it's vastly better to be a journalist now. If you look at the kind of stories we're able to write now, if you look at the kind of writing we're able to do, if you look at the data we have at our disposal, it is so much more interesting. It is so much more varied.
We will know that we've done a good job on this when people stop using this term. When data journalism is so constant that it's just journalism, as it always has been and always should be.
So some video highlights from me is data is a tool, just like an interview. You know, I tell my editors all the time, I'm going to go and write queries and question the data. I have a large data set out there. I'm writing code to pull information from it. Data leads us to stories that we might not otherwise find. I can't tell you how many times where I've gotten a database just because I was curious and ended up querying it and writing a really good story because of it. Other information from the highlights, don't just tell readers about the data, make it relevant to them. Put it in context, in other words. And I also gleaned from the video that data allows us to describe reality. Course overview, I break this class down into 4 parts. Part number 1, how data can help reporters. Where to find data, how to request data, and once we have it, how to weave data into our stories. 2, manipulating data in Excel. We're learning a lot of cool functions in Excel, including concatenation, which is adding columns together, doing simple math in Excel, and cleaning up data in Excel. The 3rd part is analyzing data with structured query language, or SQL. You can think of SQL as Excel on steroids. It's a lot more powerful, lets you do a lot more really cool things. And the final part, we'll do visualizing data with Tableau. Now, Tableau is a free non-coding program that lets you create interactive maps and graphics. Course objectives. understanding what data are available. Believe it or not, I have a spreadsheet at work of every licensed dog and cat in Mecklenburg County. It's like 200,000 records. It includes the pet's names, the owner's names, the address of the pet, and this is all data that is open to the public. We'll also want to learn how to request data. This means learning a little bit about North Carolina's public records law, master cleaning and querying data using Excel and SQL, discover how to use data to guide our reporting. Data is usually just the first part of your reporting. Rarely would you query a database, write it up, and publish it. Usually it's the first step that leads you to new questions and new sources. We'll find out how to weave data into our stories. And finally, we'll get acquainted with interactive tools, specifically with Tableau and creating online maps and charts. Tests and assignments. I'm planning on 3 tests, one in Excel, one in SQL, and one in Tableau. That may change, so please keep an eye online for any new posts or announcements. There'll be a handful of assignments, some small, some big, some will be graded, some won't. The point is to make sure you understand the lesson that was just taught. And this is a class where if you don't stay up to speed, you can get behind really quickly. Questions? I'm always available, either by email, cell phone, carrier pigeon, whatever you want. Reach out to me. I am passionate about data, and I want you guys to learn it too. Course material. One book. It's called Data Literacy, a User's Guide by David Herzog. He's actually an old professor of mine at the University of Missouri. A flash drive, preferably an 8 gigabyte flash drive so we can store all our data. We'll deal with a lot of files in here. We'll keep them all in a couple folders so they're easy to find and reuse. Okay, let me give you this scenario. An 8-lane bridge crossing a major river in your city collapsed. 13 people are dead. Some fell 150 feet to the water below. And you're a new reporter in the newsroom, right? You want to impress your editors. You know, we have some reporters who are contacting the State Department of Transportation, some reporters contacting the City Department of Transportation, others are calling up bridge experts or running to the scene, and you're the data person. What do? What about this? What about you log on to the Federal Highway Administration's website? Now, the Federal Highway Administration stores the National Bridge Inventory. And the National Bridge Inventory is a gigantic data set that lists every bridge in the United States, and it includes their conditions, the time they were built, what they're made of, where they are, and you can download these files. So in this scenario, let's say we are from Minnesota, and the bridge just collapsed, and we download Minnesota's file. This is what it looks like. Pretty crazy, huh? This is a screenshot of a delimited text file. And believe it or not, data reporters love text files because Excel and database managers like a SQL server can import these really easy and make complete sense of them. Like this. This is the National Bridge Inventory in an SQL file. You can see how that text file that was sort of all jumbled together lined up into neat columns and rows, right? And say you're the data reporter and you're at your desk. In my case, it's a desk with a couple cutouts of sharks at the Observer, and you're back there querying the data, writing code for it to find out as much information as you can on the bridge that just collapsed. And this is what you find. That it crossed the Mississippi River, that it was built in 1967, that on average it carries 141,000 vehicles a day, it's around 581 meters long, the deck was in fair condition, the substructure, meaning the base of the bridge, was in satisfactory condition, and the superstructure, look at that. According to the data, the superstructure is in poor condition. Now that could be the start of a really interesting story. It could go like this. The nearly 2,000 foot long Mississippi River Bridge that collapsed Monday and killed 13 people had supports that were in poor condition, according to federal data. And if we keep querying the data and we look at all those rows and all those columns, we find out that more than 550 bridges in Minnesota are in the same or worse condition as the span that collapsed. Now, that's pretty powerful information that we gleaned from public records that was right at our fingertips. All it took was for a reporter to download it and analyze it. And this event actually happened. In 2007, the Interstate 35 bridge collapsed right outside Minneapolis, and I can guarantee you that reporters, specifically data reporters at the Star Tribune, the first thing they did was log on to the Federal Highway Administration's website and grabbed the National Bridge Inventory and began querying it specifically for that bridge and for other bridges with the same condition. That's the power of data reporting. A lot of information without waiting on PR folks to call you back, without being ignored by bridge experts. It's data that we have right at our fingertips that allows us to ask better questions and talk to people who can make sense of what our data says. The first program that we'll use in class is Microsoft Excel. And I'm sure most of you, if not all, have used Excel, but I don't know if you used it like we will. We'll be cleaning data with Excel, sometimes hundreds of thousands of records. Excel, by the way, can have up to 1 million records and up to 16,000 columns. We'll also be sorting data in Excel, filtering data, and learning to write formulas for small calculations, summing numbers, finding the average, the percent change, etc. All that will be in Excel. Then we'll move on to a database manager, a SQL program. And you can think of SQL as Excel on steroids. It's a lot more powerful. It can hold more records, around 2 million of them, and it can do some really cool things, like identify specific records. We were able to pick out that specific bridge that collapsed. It can aggregate data, do math just like Excel can. It can group data by characteristics. And perhaps the most powerful tool that Excel has is it can join data. And I'll give you this example. Say you have 2 tables, otherwise known as databases. And in one table is a list of every school bus driver in North Carolina. And in the other table is a list of every sex offender in North Carolina. Well, a SQL program will let those 2 tables talk to each other. So you can find all the people who appear in the school bus driver database that also appear in the sex offender database. I've seen that done in newsrooms, and I've seen stories like that done in newsrooms, and it's a really powerful tool that we'll learn, and we'll learn to write the code, the structured query language behind it. Finally, we'll be learning Tableau. Now, these are online interactive maps and graphics. This is a quick one that I did for the Observer, and it shows a population change for North Carolina. In this case, the red counties are small population increases, in some cases decreases, and the green counties are counties that grow a lot. And behind maps like this are databases, and Tableau is just reading a database with a geographical interface. Here's another example of a Tableau map. This is something that I do for the Observer regularly, and this is plotting all crimes in Mecklenburg County. You can shade a map by county, you can shade it by state or by city, but in this case, these are individual latitude and longitude, individual address points for all the crimes. And for this, I don't know if you can read the legend, but this one, the blue dots are crimes against people, or usually violent crimes, and the red or the orange dots are property crimes, such as vandalism. And finally, we'll also learn how to create charts in Tableau. And in this case, this is a simple bar chart that shows how suicides among North Carolina inmates have increased in recent years. And again, this chart is reading a database behind it, and it's simply putting that database on screen as an interactive tool. So, why in the world is database journalism important? Well, first of all, I made a career out of it, so I think it's really important. Second of all, it provides deeper insight. Say that I'm a reporter and I find out that there were 87 homicides in Charlotte last year. Well, is that a little? Is that a lot? I don't know, but I guarantee you if I had a database of every homicide in the city from 1990 to present, I would be able to tell how many on average each year have, and therefore say if 87 was a lot or little. Data journalism also lets us state facts. No longer is it a he said, she said type story. We have the information at our fingertips, and it comes directly from a government source, and it allows us to write authoritatively and ask questions authoritatively. It holds those in power accountable. They can't deny the facts that we have. It comes right from a government source 9 times out of 10. Data journalism is the key to journalism future. Let's face it, journalists have it hard nowadays. We're competing with a lot of networks. We're competing with people who have biases. We're competing with people who have short attention spans. We're competing with the Real Housewives of Orange County. And data journalism allows us more information to not only entertain people, but also to provide deeper insight. And last but certainly not least, it helps us tell better stories. We'll go over a lot of numbers in this class. We'll write a lot of queries. But when it comes down to it, we're journalists, and our goal is to tell better stories. Okay, a quick wrap up. Rarely is data the end all. Usually it's just the beginning. The last thing you want to do is query data and post it online. That's a way to get in trouble. It always needs to be fact checked. And part of that fact check will be further reporting, and that's what data journalism does. It helps guide your reporting. It tells you who to talk to, and it tells you what questions to ask. And if you do it right, if you're back in your cube surrounded by sharks while all the other reporters are on the phone waiting for PR people to call you back, and you walk up to your editor and you say that bridge was in poor condition when it collapsed, you look like a rock star. I am looking forward to a great year, and for now let's get to a little bit of homework. Not much. Read the first chapter of Data Journalism. And also, since I introduced myself, I want to hear a little bit about you. Write me a quick introduction, 200 to 300 words, telling me a little bit about your journalism or communication background. I'd love to know about your career goal for immediately graduating, and then your career goal 10, 20, 30 years from now.